happen in Pierce County, in St. Croix County, that's happened in Pierce County. So please adopt the proposed amendment as put forward in the packet by Supervisor Van Summeren. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Virginia Drath.
Hello, my name is Virginia Drath. I'm from Emerald Township, excuse me. I agree with Mr. Van Summeren's revisiting of the language concerning the landowner agreements to the original language that was altered last December. Landowners have the right to know where, when, and how, and by whom is applying manure on their land. Landowners should also know how much phosphorus and nitrates are going on their land. No amount of rent dollars can take the place of safe drinking water. It's getting hard to know where the manure is coming from and where it's going. The last week of February, on a Monday through a Thursday, 4 days in a row from 7 in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or 4:30 in the afternoon, manure trucks were hauling manure back and forth from Ridge Breeze Dairy to Croix Breeze Dairy. I went to the Croix Breeze Dairy to see what was going on because I thought, this isn't even March, and they were, or April, and they were spreading manure, and I wondered where they were going to go. So I followed one of the trucks. I didn't know how far it was going to go, but it went all the way down to Ridge Breeze Dairy, which was 45 miles. And on the way down there, I saw trucks coming towards me, and they were going back up to the Croix Breeze Dairy. Well, I actually counted 10, and I figured there were at least 15 because 2 others were parked down there waiting to load, and 2 were parked in the Croix Breeze Dairy. And they were transferring manure from Ridge Breeze Dairy's lagoon to Croix Breeze Dairy. The 90 miles round trip on the roads. That's quite a hit on the roads. And DNR was aware because I did call Mr. Jackson, and he was aware and gave the okay. Something wrong with the lagoons. But so now that manure belongs to the nutrient management of Croix Breeze Dairy now. So it's hard for landowners to know where it's coming and going and how much it's hurting our soil. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Stephen Miller.
Steve Mueller, Warren Township. Back this winter, I think this committee and then the full supervisors, we worked really hard with a lot of people. Some tense, some talks, a lot of giving and taking. And I thought that it was a fairly good outcome that most everybody was happy with. The ordinance that came up, in fact, you look back, the supervisors passed the amendment 18-0. There was no nay vote. So I'd like you to consider that before opening this up. We don't want to be back after this month after month after month. The landowner agreements are most likely proprietary information depending on how they're garnered, and that's just something that's not going to fly, and in that farmers can't be given that information out in public settings. So I encourage you to leave the ordinance closed as it is. I think it was good work, and let's just continue on. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. All right, next we have Steve Shala.
Yeah, good evening, supervisors. Here to speak on items 9 and 10 on the ordinance and the water quality topic. I was at a meeting on Tuesday, and they presented this slide that I was proud of, and I wanted to bring it to share with you as it relates to these topics. It talks about the impact, the carbon impact per unit of milk produced in different places of the world. The United States, Europe, and New Zealand are the leaders in this category. They're half of what China is. They're a third of what South America is. The world's going to produce more dairy. That's economics say that's a fact. economists, I should say. Where that milk should be generated is the question. If you're an environmentalist, if you want what's best for the world, you put that milk production in the best places. You put it in the United States, you put it in America's dairyland, Wisconsin. So I feel like if you're pro-environmental, you're pro-milk here. You're pro-dairy here. So, and you're pro-dairy here because there are permitting, there is checks and balances, there is accountability. So I encourage you to consider that. I think there's a lot of opportunity for better communication to the farms, to actual collaboration. As you look at that list that's in item 10 of groups, there's a couple of omissions, I feel like. That's pretty frustrating. So I encourage you to leave the ordinance stand as written. I think it was a good compromise and allows everybody to proceed and allows dairies to be the best in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last comment card I have is from Tomswald.
Thank you. Tom's Wald, Pleasant Valley Township. I feel like we got a little deja vu going on. We just passed this. We just, as a full board, discussed this ordinance, and it's back on the agenda. I understand that is a legal procedure. Parley Pro allows it. So I would ask you to accept the findings as you guys as a whole had decided. There's, to my knowledge, been no new information. My knowledge is that, you know, not everyone's happy. That's part of a compromise. So let's move forward, not backwards. Let's not spend our tax dollars rehashing stuff that we just went through. 4 months, that's not very long to be reopening ordinances. I also feel like we need to stop the demonization of manure. Manure is one of the most beneficial sources of fertilizer that we have. It's a complete cycle. It's a recycling cycle. We can put it back in. It provides soil activity, biological activity in the soil, and there's all these benefits that if we stop and try to demonize it so much, what are we going to do for our fertilizer? We're going to get commercial fertilizers, which is a more volatile form. It's more likely to leach. It's got more problems. So I just ask you, is 4 months enough time to reopen an ordinance? And are we really wanting to totally demonize manure? Because it seems to me like this is a great source of nutrients for our soil in our county. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to ask now if there is anyone else who would like to please step up.
I'm John Gostovich. I live in the town of Hudson. I think it's important for us to realize that nobody here is demonizing farmers or manure. We are talking about property rights. We're talking about my right to know if somebody is going to spread manure from a dairy operation on my land without my permission, let alone without a discussion, without a timetable, without a sense of what that's going to do if I'm already crop farming and putting manure down. This is purely a property rights issue. And if you all won't seem fit to protect my property from somebody who's going to be spreading manure on my property without my permission, we have a real problem. This isn't about the dairy industry. This is about being neighborly, being honest, and providing information that should be provided. If the CAFOs feel that this is proprietary information that they can't share, then I guess they're just gonna have to keep all manure in the lagoon and build another lagoon, because you can't be out spreading this stuff without permission. It's as simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to make a public comment? Any other public comment? And again, any other public comment? All right. With that, we will close public comment. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. There will be an opportunity for during the public hearing for those two items that have a public hearing today. We'll now move on to public hearing number 1, which is the rezoning request for Franklin's Carpentry LLC in the town of Star Prairie.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. The first hearing tonight is the rezoning application by Franklin's Carpentry LLC. Applicant is James Franklin, and this property is located in the town of Star Prairie off of 192nd Avenue. The total acreage is 11.68 acres, and the applicant is seeking to rezone from R1 to R2 residential. A little bit of background and purpose of request. The requested R2 residential zoning is sought to create 2 lots of about 5 acres each. Right now, the current R1 zoning limits the property to develop at 1 unit per 10 acres density. So hence the need to go from R1 to R2 to get the 2 lots versus the 1. Additionally, the town of Star Prairie requires 2 acre lot minimums. In this case, that minimum would be met. The parcel is currently vacant with stands of pine trees for timber harvesting, and this application being processed is pursuant to section 15.540 County Code. Next, we'll take a look at some location maps. The subject property is highlighted in blue at the intersection of 192nd Avenue and 93rd Street. You see the village of Somerset to the west, city of New Richmond to the east, and this parcel is located north of Highway 64. Zooming in a little bit, we see the 11.68 acre property. You see the stands of harvest trees on the property. The general area has a mix of rural housing development on lots between 1.5 and 10 acres. We do have some agricultural uses taking place, other stands of pine for harvesting, and you see the Apple River to the northeast of the property and some of the associated wetlands with the rivershed. The next slide is a draft proposed certified survey map that the property owner would pursue if the rezoning is approved. Again, this is a draft CSM, but it does show the 2 lot concept. And you'll see in the middle of each lot at my cursor, the proposed housing locations. Again, the 2 lots on the 11.68 acres. You see the colored hatches here in the blue and purple on each lot. These represent steep slopes, and the applicant with their surveyors trying to keep those house pads off of the steep slopes. A little bit of the general features of the property, some of the surrounding zoning. Everything in the darker yellow is R2. Everything you see in the lighter yellow is currently R1. And again, we talked a little bit about some of the adjacent land uses when we showed the aerial photograph. Next, we take a look at the comprehensive plans of the town and the county. And by state statute, the rezoning request must be consistent with the comprehensive plan. And you'll see a map of the town of Star Prairie, comprehensive future land use map. The blue dot is the subject property. And that property is included with what the town calls the mixed rural conservation design designation. And that does allow and support smaller lot residential development and encourages conservation design. The development should not negatively impact prime farmland, and really this parcel is currently not being farmed at this time. The St. Croix County Comprehensive Plan is shown below, and the red circle indicates the subject property at the point of the arrow. And the county designation land use is mixed rural residential. And the intent of this district is to support farming, ag-related uses, woodlands, and single-family residential development. The language in the county plan also indicates that this land can be zoned R1 or R2 residential. So based on review of the comp plans, the future land use maps and the supporting narrative would support a rezoning to the R2 residential district. Next, we'll take a quick look at some of the natural resource maps. The subject property highlighted in blue. You'll see that part of the area is included within an environmental corridor, and this has to do with some of the steep slopes and then some of the associated wetlands to the northeast of the property that we looked at a bit earlier. Natural resource map also indicates that there are no shoreland areas, floodplains, or closed depressions on the subject property. Again, to the northeast and associated with the Apple River are some wetlands and floodplain areas that do not impact this property. This next map shows some of the steep slopes that we looked at earlier. You'll see some of the steep slopes running north to south at the cursor. And again, on some of the other parcel, some lots or some steep slopes running along the lot from northeast to southwest. In case these slopes are impacted, the county does have ordinances that would deal with impacts to steep slopes. These are covered under Chapter 15 zoning, grading, and land disturbance. But as I shared with you earlier, the applicant and the surveyor are doing a pretty good job of staying out of those slope areas. Governmental agency review, the Town of Star Prairie Town Board recommended approval of this request for rezoning at their April 8th, 2025 meeting. And then some of the technical review findings, we just cite some of the town comprehensive plan objectives, encouraging a desirable mix of land uses that maintains the town's rural character while allowing moderate residential development, managing and controlling the rated development, and supporting developments that are primarily single-family or two-family homes. Some of the applicable statutes and criteria that the committee must consider is that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan, also the natural resource management plan, some of the maps we just looked at, and that the rezoning and proposed use is consistent and can comply with St. Croix County zoning ordinance, and that the town has approved the rezoning request. And also that the rezoning and proposed use is consistent with surrounding districts and does not result in spot zoning. Staff recommendation is based on the town review of the application as well as staff review. And based on that, staff recommends to the committee approval of the rezoning amendment from R1 to R2. Consistency cited with the technical review findings we discussed earlier, and that the request is consistent with both the town and the county comprehensive future land use maps and the designation descriptions for those categories, that the town has recommended approval of the application, and the use is consistent and would be able to comply with Chapter 15 zoning. As of 4:45 today, we have not received any public comment on this request as a result of the hearing notices we sent out within 300 feet, as well as the required published notice in the local paper 2 weeks prior to this. That concludes the overview of this request.
Thanks, John. Any brief questions for John, I guess? Otherwise, we can see if there's any member of the public want to comment either in favor or against this rezoning? Anyone from the public want to comment on this rezoning? Yes, please.
John Sonentag, here with the owner, James Franklin. Simply just offering that we're here if there's any questions, and that obviously we're in support of this request. I think Mr. Hilger's covered everything that we seem appropriate, but if you guys have any questions, we're here to answer them.
Sounds good. Thanks for coming. Any other member of the public want to comment on this rezoning? All right, we will close the public hearing. Now move to agenda item number 1. And we're reloading to discuss this. Where am I? To discuss the ordinance amending the comprehensive zoning ordinance in the town of Star Prairie. Anyone want to make a motion? Yep, Supervisor Van Sumeren.
I make a motion that we grant the request to amend the comprehensive zoning plan, section 29, township 31, north range 18, west of the town of Star Prairie, 11.68 acres. And my reasoning behind it is it does not look like farmland. It's pretty heavily wooded land. It has quite some steep slopes in it. There's housing all around it, and probably most of all, the town of Star Prairie says it's okay.
Yep, Supervisor Shirley with the second. Any more discussion from the committee? No? All's, ready for a vote then? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Carries unanimously, thank you. We'll now move on to public hearing number 2, the Roleo Land County Outdoor Frontier, or Company, I guess, Outdoor Frontier Inc., Town of Warren, CUP 2025-04.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Outdoor Frontier, Inc., White Tier Miracles request to modify a conditional use permit, CUP 2018-008, particularly condition number 5, to allow for a year-round use of an existing hunting lodge as a short-term rental within the R2 zoning district pursuant to section 15.375 of the St. Croix County zoning ordinance. The property affected is located in section 18 and 19, town 29 north, range 18 west, town of Warren, of course, within the county, more commonly known as 891 Alexander Road, Roberts, Wisconsin, 54023. The county did provide a Class 2 hearing notice in the Star Observer, the official county newspaper, on April 3rd and April 10th, as well as providing the hearing notice to the adjoining property owners within 300 feet. We have not received any public comment on this request at this time. So just an aerial view, the property has frontage on Alexander Road and Highway 12. The property is currently zoned R2, and it is surrounded by R2 zoning, except the town of Hudson is adjacent to the west side here. The property is a total of 190 acres, and there's 80 acres of fenced-in deer hunting land for a hunting preserve. The blue highlighted parcel here is where the hunting lodge and an accessory building are located on the property. So here's just an aerial view of the hunting lodge and then the fairly large accessory building. A land use permit is also required for the short-term Airbnb, VRBO type of use of the property. And that would be required after this hearing tonight if this was to be approved by the committee, because what we were really wanting in that is to make sure they've got enough off-street parking, to make sure their sanitary system is sized appropriately for the number of guests. And then also we ask that that permit number is included in any advertisements on Airbnb or VRBO so that we know that they're permitted instead of just operating illegally. So just some background information about the property. So there was a certificate to operate a deer farm on April 9th of 2017 from the DNR. It's also approved through DATCAP in 2017. They also have a livestock premise permit with DATCAP that is current. The previous conditional use permit allowed for the hunting lodge to be rented by hunting parties that were going there and that for their hunt. But what they're really asking for is now just to allow that for an open short-term VRBO style rental throughout the remaining part of the year to get some extra cost and for other events that might be hosted on the property. Some more information about the site. The property does have an on-site property manager who does a lot of the land management, planting food plots, fencing, that kind of stuff. Currently, in that there's very little use of the property, and that from September to January because they're not able to hunt. Their sewer system that serves the lodge is up to a 5-bedroom system, so that would be up to 10 guests that could use it, and it is current and has been maintained well since that time period. And then Outdoor Frontier has submitted documentation and that to the health department for the proper approvals for the rental of the short term and also for serving meals in the lodge. Okay. So we kind of already went over the background. We believe the impact to the traffic and surrounding properties will be minimal, and that with the purchase of the additional land as a buffer, and it's just used as a dwelling in that anyway. The compatibility with the adjoining property owners, and that the closest property owner, I believe, is a half-mile away, and so there's not a lot of traffic, and then the traffic is accessing right from Highway 12 or Alexander Road. And so we believe that this, and that CUP would be within the spirit and intent of the ordinance, so that the building is being used similar to like a normal single-family dwelling would be. The only possible impact that we could see is just possibly some campfire smoke or something like that. But again, with the other properties being a half-mile away, it's quite a ways. Notice was provided of this CUP application to the town of Warren, but they have not provided any comments. They're not required to, so we assume that they have no comment. Then the Community Development Committee should look to section 15.550, section 6, A through E here. That's the conditions in that you would be referring to and evaluating this request for, but really all the other conditions from the previous 2018 CUP would remain in place. It would just allow for that lodge building to be a short-term rental for like an Airbnb or VRBO. And then staff does have findings of fact and conclusions of law sheet, but I'll turn it over for any comments on that before we get into that. Any questions?
Jason, isn't it unusual for the township not to have a remark on this, or is that quite normal?
So, if the town had received some negative feedback over the years, I mean, it's been operating now for about 6 years, then maybe we would have heard something. And depending on the use, a lot of times if they're not high-intensity uses like a gravel pit or something like that, we would expect the town to provide comment, but it's not unnormal in that when it's a low-impact use, and if there hasn't been complaints with their current activities.
One more. So will they have to have a hotel license or something like that? Because as I understand this, it's not going to be rented for months at a time, but weekends at a time and things like that?
Yep. So they'll have a tourist rooming house license through the public health department that goes, and that with the state budget cycle, so June to June or July to July. And so they'll have to have that permit through the public health here at the county. So that'll have inspections on the water, smoke detectors, that kind of stuff within the building.
And how about for food production and food serving?
Yep, so there's where I'm not as familiar with it, but they do have that that seasonal, special organization serving meals moderate, that license for the, I'll call it bed and breakfast side of the short-term rental for when they're operating as a hunting lodge or resort.
Any other questions? If now we can take some public comment if there is any. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this conditional use permit application? Any public comment on this CUP application? Any public comment on the application? No, all right, we shall continue. Close the public hearing part. Move on to agenda item number 2, which I just,
Okay, so for findings of fact, we've got the owner, we've got the site address, we've got the previous CUP request and action here that was granted by the Board of Adjustment, that all the previous conditions or terms of the CUP will be set forth, or they'll stay in effect. The only one that would change would be condition 5, which would be to read, the existing home will be available for use to hunting parties as needed during the hunting season and otherwise is allowed to be used as a short-term rental, subject to Chapter 15, Section 15.375. No comments have been received from the town of Warren. I will just point out too, one of the main points why it had to come back through the CUP is that the 2017-18 ordinance was Chapter 17, and now we're Chapter 15, so this was before the comprehensive rewrite, and that condition was limiting them from being able to do the short-term rental. Conclusions of law, we believe that there's no impact to the safe and healthful conditions of the property or the surrounding properties. Since it's going to be within the existing building and that, we don't believe that there's any additional water pollution or erosion potential out there. There's going to be no change to any of the existing topo drainage features or any of the tree cover on site. The site is already developed, so we don't have any impact on the environmental corridor, and it is a fairly large property as well. We already covered the erosion. The site has good access to Alexander Road and Highway 12, so they've got that covered. The need of the proposed use, the applicant, and that has the lodge there. They've got the facility there already. It's a single-family household setup, so it seems like the Airbnb or the short-term rental is a compatible use. There is other homes in the area, so it's compatible with the surrounding uses. Their sewer system is good for 5 bedrooms, which would be 10 people. So with that, on the basis of the above findings of fact and conclusions of law, the Community Development Committee, we would suggest to recommend approval of this modification of the conditional use permit, specifically amending provision number 5 of the CUP. This is 2028, that should be 2018-008 to allow for this structure to be used for short-term rental. And that's basically what it says here, that they would follow the land use permit and they'd be able to rent that structure, and they would have to have a public health permit as well.
All right, yeah, go ahead, Supervisor Shirley.
I'll make a motion to approve the CUP as just discussed for the Outdoor Frontiers project, modifying the conditional use permit for condition number 5.
Supervisor Van Summeren seconds. Do you need an amendment to change 2020 to 2018, or is that just like a typo that we know is?
Just a typo.
Okay, that's what I figured, but any other thoughts or questions from the committee? Seems pretty straightforward to me. It seems getting our feet wet with an easy one, I guess, huh?
Jason, did you want to give them the lecture on findings of facts, that they're the ones that are making those findings of facts?
Correct, yeah. So, and that's.
Since it's your first one, you're going to get the speech.
Yeah.
Give me the speech.
So technically, it's up to the committee and that to create your findings of fact. Findings of fact are what are the facts of the application in front of the board, and that then the conclusions of law, if I jump back into that document, those are from the ordinance. And so you should be thinking of evaluating each application on, is there an impact to the safe and healthful conditions? Is there an impact to the water pollution from that proposed use, whatever it might be? So a gravel pit might actually have something for water pollution if they were mining into the groundwater table, for example. What is the impact on the topographic drainage features, vegetation, and that what it's important to think about with all of these different conditions is, so let's say that we do have a use and they're gonna go in and they're gonna level a hill. Well, maybe before that hill blocked that proposed use from a housing development. So this would be a good time to look at it and say, well, now they're going to level that hill. So maybe they need to do some screenings or some landscapings to buffer and that use from those housing developments. So that's what these questions are designed to do, is to think and that about what potentially you might need to assign as conditions to minimize the impact of the use. Of course, environmental corridors, sometimes certain uses just don't belong in certain environmentally sensitive areas, so that might be an issue. So these are the provisions, and that I won't go down through every one. I think you kind of get the idea. But I can provide you with a sheet with the use of that. So as you're hearing us go through the staff report, or as you hear public comment, that you could be kind of making notes to each one of these points if you would like. Okay, we'll have that for the next meeting. It's right out of the ordinance, so, yep.
Any other questions, thoughts, concerns? No? All right, I think we're ready to vote on the CUP. All those in favor of granting the CUP and agreeing to the statements of fact as drafted, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Passes unanimously, thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item 3, the report from the St. Croix Economic Development Corporation.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'll just introduce Melissa Meschke with our St. Croix County Economic Development Corporation for an annual report and kind of an update of their programming.
Thank you very much for having me tonight. Excited to share the updates from St. Croix EDC. I have a few slides, but if anyone has any questions, I don't know if that's how this works, but feel free to ask questions along the way. So St. Croix EDC, for those in the audience that might not know, we're an independent nonprofit 501c6 that does economic development for all of St. Croix County. We do get about 40% of our funding from the county, for which we are thankful for being included every year, and the rest comes from memberships and sponsorships. We do several things. We're focused on a few in specific that I wanted to highlight. Housing is a big topic right now. It's hard to talk about economic development without addressing housing. Workforce attraction, retention, and development. We all know that we don't have enough people to work, and that problem's only going to get more difficult, so we're working on initiatives to help that. Business retention, expansion, and attraction. I help people find buildings and land, answer questions about funding, getting started as a business, and everything in between. Working with some childcare initiatives as well. We do have a childcare shortage here in St. Croix County. Legislative issues, since we're 501c6, we're allowed to lobby, so I will reach out to our local legislators on certain issues. And recently we actually added tourism to the organization as well, starting a committee to address that on a county-wide level. So many of you worked with Bill Rubin before. He was in this position for almost 27 years prior to me. So I'm about a year and almost a half into the role. So over the last year, we have really changed as an organization. We rebranded, we got a new website. We now have a customer relationship management system. We take digital payments. We manage our memberships through that customer management system as well. Went to an online QuickBooks system. We made a ton of internal changes, but we were also really busy externally as well. Our current member count as of today is 129. In 2024, we did have a revenue growth of 6.7%, and we added 15 new members. So far this year, we are at, I think actually the number is now 10 additional new members year to date. So we're a growing organization. We're trying to get out into the community as much as we can, doing programming, attending events, and helping with as many people as possible with me as one person. So I think I added, we did add an updated membership package. We have a small business level now. We used to have a lower membership level, and we re-implemented that, and it has been popular for those small businesses under $1 million in revenue. So as I mentioned, housing is definitely a current focus for us. We do have a county-wide housing study in progress. Our estimated completion is June of this year. We are on track for that, so you should see that housing study pretty soon. We do have our roadshow up on our website. We haven't done the press release and those kind of things, but we're going to be visiting 7 communities over a 2-month span in the summer, various days and times of the week, times of the day and days of the week, so we can have as many people attend those as possible. In those housing study roadshow stops, we will be presenting the housing study data as well as some initiatives specific to addressing affordable housing, and then have kind of like an open public comment session for each of those stops. So really excited to get that information out and have all that put together. And I do have a sneak peek of some data on the next slide. I am part of the revitalization of the EDC in Baldwin, and actually just this week I was reached out to about the EDC in Somerset as well. So really excited to see energy behind economic development here in the county and within individual communities as well. As I mentioned, we just added countywide tourism efforts. So there's a lot of people doing tourism here in St. Croix County, but there hasn't been a countywide effort to bring everybody together. So with the help of Julie here, we actually launched a committee at the EDC to address tourism. We did launch a pitch competition. We really haven't had one here in St. Croix County, working with the Innovation Center and the Small Business Development Center on that. We did end up having 9 applications for that pitch competition, so we'll be reviewing those and picking the ones for pitching in May. Constantly visiting businesses for business retention and expansion. Last year I had over 300 visits, so I keep on my toes. I take every appointment that I can. And we do offer various programming and partnership efforts as well. The best way to keep up to date with our efforts at the EDC is through our newsletter and through our website. We do on social media as well, but that's harder to keep up on. There's so much going on. So our newsletter is one of the best resources. I did want to share some preliminary data from the housing studies. So this will be solidified with a June presentation, but the numbers have been staying pretty consistent as we wrap up everything. But preliminary data from the study reveals several key points here for St. Croix County. The state of Wisconsin projects the population of St. Croix County will increase another 10% from 2020 to 2050. Household sizes are expected to decrease with that. So we're having less people per household in the county, which increases the need for number of households. So that shows the need for additional housing units. The median sale price of homes in St. Croix County rose significantly, increasing 76% from $160,000 in 2010 to $282,000 in 2020, and then another 35% from $282,000 to $381,000 in 2020 to 2024. So those numbers are striking and significant. So that's part of what we're going to address in that housing study is affordable housing. The census estimates indicate 19% of homeowners and 36% of renters are housing cost burden, meaning they spend more than 30% of their income on their housing cost. That's rent or mortgage, insurance, and utilities. Furthermore, 15% of renters are classified as severely cost burdened, spending 50% or more of their income on housing. The rising cost of materials, labor, infrastructure, and fees required for residential development have contributed to higher housing costs in the area, as you all are aware. But I did want to share some sneak peeks. We'll be sharing all that data in more detail starting in June. I did also provide some additional recent data from the Q1 2025 Lightcast report. So it's one of the resources we use for data here in St. Croix County. The population numbers, as was mentioned before, we're still growing. Our current population is about 98,000. We've grown 7,000 people over the last 5 years, and we're projected to grow another 5,000 over the next 5 years. We have 41,213 jobs in the county. Our median household income is $98,000. Our labor force participation rate is 65.8%. It's much higher than the national average, actually, so it's exciting to see that number. And then unemployment in December was the most recent number that I was able to pull for this, was 3.59%. St. Croix County is home to just over 17,000 millennials and home to 29,000 retiring soon, that 55 plus. So that's definitely a number that we keep an eye on, understanding the labor force issues that we're seeing now, although not as severe these days, is only going to get more complicated as we have more people retire than are coming into the workforce. So opportunities and challenges, just generally that I'm finding in my role here. Opportunities are Minnesota laws coming into effect from employers are a deterrent to growth in that state. I do get a lot of calls asking about taxes and other requirements for employers. Our challenges include limited large parcels of land. When we're getting requests for proposals, we're seeing often parcels, 150, 200 acres that people are looking for really large developments. We don't have a lot of those ready, shovel ready with utilities and things available for submitting to those proposals. Limited energy grid for large scale requests for information. And then I will put on here the uncertainty in the market has been a big challenge these last few weeks in particular. People are just kind of afraid to hit that go button with all the uncertainty at the federal level. So seeing a lot of that come into play recently as well. To put my contact information on here, I'm available for anyone and everyone in the county and beyond for assistance in economic development. Did we want questions? Is that how this works? Okay, I'll open it up for questions.
You have a question? Any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Melissa, I think we had an email exchange about the housing study and some work that's being done at the state level to project the need for housing.
Yep.
We're not unique there. Mine's more of a qualitative question. It seems like a lot of the older residents like myself had this idea of a single-family home at the end of a cul-de-sac or on 2 or 3 acres. And, we're recognizing that that can be a very expensive way to develop and populate an area and provide services. So is there anything being done to help kind of manage expectations of the population as to what is a viable housing solution for a community?
Good
There
question.
seems to be an aversion to apartments and townhomes, and people think it'll devalue their property.
Yeah, great question. So a few things. One of the things that we've been trying to do is define what affordable means. Affordable has a different meaning to everybody. We're not necessarily talking about subsidized or Section 8 housing. We're talking about police officers and teachers, people that have well-paying jobs here in the community that just aren't making enough to pay the rent or mortgage here. So affordability definition is one of the things that we're doing. The other thing is really talking about the need for density and why it's important. In the housing study, we'll be dividing out the types of units that are really needed to address housing for all. So you'll hear me in those presentations use the word housing for all a lot, and that is really to address that, not everybody can have a 5 acres with a 2,000 square foot house when we're trying to address these numbers. The numbers that we were coming up with, I didn't put on the preliminary data study, but it is around 2,000 owner units and around 800 rental units. So we're dividing out those in the study, which I think will help address some of that too. So when we're seeing these larger apartment complexes being proposed, we can fit it into the housing study and have the data to back it up. But yes, that is definitely part of the conversation. And, we get a lot of, we don't want to be the next Woodbury, so we address those conversations as they come about. But it is really critical to develop more housing here and really think about housing for all. So I hope that the housing study addresses some of those issues as we kind of work to define a lot of this, that when people think housing, they tend to have one thing pop into their head, but there's really a lot of different things we can address when we're addressing housing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks for coming, Melissa.
Yeah.
I'm on the EDC board, so I see a lot of the stuff that's happening behind the scenes, so good to have you here.
Thanks.
We question would be on development. We talked about in a slide before about opportunities from companies and individuals moving from neighboring states. What do you think is our largest challenge to that? Is that the I know you mentioned a couple of them there, but is our energy issue the more problem, or is it the finding suitable land?
I would say actually housing tends to be the bigger problem. So if they want to build a company here, they're there is land available, right? So maybe they have 80 acres or 40 acres that they're looking at developing. The second question is always housing. It's talent. Do we have the people here to fill the spots that they're going to be bringing? And is there housing for them to live in? We do address that a little bit, talking about the talent pool that is the Twin Cities and being able to pull those people across the border for work and hopefully eventually have them moving here. But housing tends to be the second question. Energy does come up with those really large RFIs. I mean, some of these energy requests that we're seeing come through are the size of energy that powers an entire town. So, not a lot of communities in the state are able to respond to those RFIs on an immediate level. So one of the things that we do is talk about how much energy do you need now versus 5 years from now. And that does help quell some concerns a lot of times with energy, because if we have a few years, a lot of the times the power companies can respond. But some of those really, really big power requests are just really challenging for any community to supply. So it does come up, but a lot of times those RFIs are a large power request and a large land request. So we're not necessarily able to answer because of either of those. So shovel-ready land is really important. And, I get a lot of, well, this farmer has 400 acres, or this farmer has 200 acres. They'd sell tomorrow if someone knocks on their door. It's really challenging to do land development in that sense. Have they done any work on the land? Have they done any boring and soil samples? Have they talked about zoning with the community that they're in? A lot of that work, I'll quote Aaron Sundin, he might be mad at me, but he says, developers are lazy, right? So when we get these calls, they want to take the easiest path, and communities that are easy to work with, land that is already close to ready to go. So that shovel-ready land is a deterrent too.
Years ago, before you were here, we talked about initiatives to attract businesses from Minnesota. Do you see a need for that, or a direction that you're going in that direction, or where do you see that moving?
I think there's definitely opportunity, especially with some of the new laws, like I mentioned. Those are huge costs for small businesses. So I think small businesses are really starting to do the math and seeing if it makes sense to jump the border. We have talked about doing a marketing campaign. We don't really necessarily have the immediate funds, but there are ways to apply for funding. We used WEDC for some funding a few years ago for a talent attraction campaign. One of the people that's coming onto the board in May is a PR professional, public relations professional. So I've been talking with him about some possible marketing campaigns and some grassroots things we could be doing to attract companies and talk about, tax comparisons and law comparisons. That could be a great development. One of the things in the last week, I've gotten 2 requests for an updated tax comparison sheet. It's something that WEDC used to provide and they don't anymore, but I'm just going to make one. So, those requests do come my way and I try to address them as I can, but there's definitely an opportunity there. I think especially as we get towards next January when the next law will go into effect in Minnesota regarding required family leave. That's a big one. That's a really big cost for employers. So I think that there's a good possibility there for marketing.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. Oh, that was it, wasn't it? I'll let you direct.
Sean, ready for me to start?
Oh, yeah.
Financial part. Not going to go into a lot of detail. We're 25% into the year, so really not a lot to see, especially like parks and stuff. They're seasonal. One of the things I would look at typically then is year-to-date where we are, like with the Register of Deeds, so economic indicators. So we're at 189 through March. Last year we were at 239. So we're trailing a little bit where we were last year. For recorded documents, recycling, hazardous waste are all coming up. Parks, they haven't even gotten started hardly. Extension, resource, land, and water. I guess I just open up for any questions. Otherwise, there's nothing terribly exciting with the March financial reports.
Any questions for Ken? Nope, I don't have any either. Thanks, Ken.
I didn't think so. All right, thanks.
All right, agenda 5, the update on the Xcel Energy solar project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We don't have a lot on this, but there has been several town meetings where they've had a large turnout of the public. And one of the meetings in that at the town of Baldwin resulted in them passing a moratorium on permitting and construction of all solar energy systems, wind energy systems, and battery energy storage systems for a year, for them to take and have more time to take and look into the impacts of those facilities. We've heard in that other towns may be considering something similar. But that is all being done at the town level. Staff has not been attending any of those town meetings. Again, we're trying to wait until we have more information from Excel, and then we're gonna hold a joint municipal meeting and that with everybody involved. We did kind of have a last minute meeting with the Excel representatives again this past Monday. They informed us that their project is being delayed a little bit. Xcel Energy has never been, I'll call it the developer of one of these facilities. And so they're working through that process. They are expecting to be able to deliver a map of the project area to the county and that around Memorial Weekend. So that got pushed back a little bit from what it was before. And they have intentions of filing with the Public Service Commission by the end of the year. Now, they hope that's not December 31st, but it sounds like it is being pushed back. Originally, that was, July, August, then it went to September, October, and now it's just by the end of the year that they hope to apply. So the purpose of our meeting Monday, it was to go over some options for joint development agreement formats. So a lot of the joint development agreement formats that are out there are for a developer and not necessarily a public utility. So they provided us in that with some other examples in that of what that text might be. So we haven't discussed any specifics. Again, we're waiting in that to get that public involvement through the municipal meetings for going through a lot of that. And of course, the community development committee's input and county board. But right now, we're just trying to get what does that look like? And of course, with Excel being new to this and with us being new to this, that's what the conversations have entailed. So with that, so I guess being that map is being pushed off to Memorial Day and that roughly, we're looking at holding that joint municipal meeting like in June now. So whereas before we had pushed it off because of the April elections to the end of April, and that now with their time frame being pushed back, our time frame would be pushed back to June as well.
Any questions, comments, concerns? No? I do have a question. So do the townships have more of a, I guess, more ability to restrict things like this that are regulated by the PSC?
No.
I didn't think so.
Yeah. So again, we're not attorneys and we're not going to give legal advice to the towns, but I think the towns are hearing from their citizens, that they want something done, so they're doing what they can, so.
Right. I guess at minimum, it can be used as, here's the town of Baldwin's input into this or whatever, but.
Yep.
It's kind of like a couple things resolutions the counties passed where they don't really carry legal weight, but they're, I guess, a indication of the feeling of the county, right?
Yeah, and with any moratorium, then once you have a moratorium, you need to be working to gather the information like down here, and that needed to figure out what they're gonna be able to regulate on it. So it's not like you can just pass a moratorium and then just sit on your hands in that for a year. You have to be actively working towards that outcome.
Yeah, go ahead.
So my follow-up question, and maybe anyone here could answer it. When we were hearing from the representative from Excel, a lot of the conversation had to do with, here is what our preliminary plans are, any cost savings, whether it's a tax benefit or something else, get funneled back to our customers. We've also heard from some residents that they don't want this. So do we know, in the event that this were completely stopped, do we have any idea of what Excel might do? Because it seems to me like there might be a potential rate increase down the road if this doesn't go through.
Well, I think, I can't speak for Excel exactly on that point, but I think that Excel has diversified all their power generation needs quite well. So, for example, the King plant, only runs a fraction of the time, so it might switch back to that kind of production. But it's very diversified and that on what their needs might be. So I can't speak to what their rate cost might be or anything like that. When we asked them about, potentially tax cuts to the federal side, and that for renewable energy systems, and that their answer was, well, this is still in line with Excel's goal to be 80% carbon reduction free by 2030. And so they weren't so concerned about the taxes and that being removed or the tax break being removed because it's still aligned with their mission and vision for the company.
Thank you.
I would add also that when we look at the paths that are available to us, we mutually agree to a joint development agreement with them in which we can help establish some parameters that are maybe helpful for the residents. We can oppose the project with the PSC. We can formally go in opposition to it. But nobody in St. Croix County is going to say yes or no to this project. It's going to be done in Madison. The PSC is the one that has all the control. So nobody in the county is going to stop this project from happening.
So I think we're making good progress. Excel seems and that agreeable to the various points that we had on the last agenda. But again, those specifics just haven't been talked about.
Any other questions or thoughts from the committee? Nope. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 6 and the UW Extension first quarter update. Carrie.
Yep. Carrie's here to give that update.
Good evening, and thank you as always for having us. Before I start, I have the quarter one report. I sent that out via email. I don't know if anyone would like it though in hard copy. I did bring copies for the committee. Okay. Also not included, but just a real quick update on our FoodWise position. We have a FoodWise coordinator at current, but our FoodWise educator position has been vacant, and we have just recently filled that. The individual is Amanda Peets. She is actually finishing up her student teaching in New Zealand, where she's working with the Maui people. She has a great amount of both teaching, information, and credentials, but also experience with food sovereignty, and we're excited to have her come on board and bring that. Additionally, and I can't name a name, but our 4-H summer intern is in process, and based on their schedule, their class schedule, we'll have that person in place though before the summer begins. So we're excited about that as well. A couple of things just to note, this is then the work plan that I had shared with you last time, and really there are a few updates to discuss. The first being Allison Sauter, our community development educator. We had presented a work plan prior, and since that time, Allison has since resigned. Her last day in office will be actually tomorrow. This is a .5 position that is shared with Polk County as well. And so I bring that to the committee for consideration. I will say that I had an initial conversation with Polk County, and without real debate and or informed sort of like committee input, they have said initially that they would not refill. And so the .5 would be up to you for determination as to what you would like to do with that. Obviously, you could go 1.0 should you wish, and I would take any feedback back to the Institute to see what decisions you might like to make.
Carrie, are you looking for an answer tonight on this?
It would be ideal, but obviously, no, it doesn't have to come as of tonight.
My initial reaction is that it might be prudent to wait.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much uncertainty with you funding. That's my only thought, but
You mean wait on filling the position? Yeah. Hold off for now and consider it again later. Yeah, probably. Yep.
Additionally, then, the Human Development and Relationships Educator position that we've been working on filling. As noted here is the work plan that I presented last time, and we are in the final stages of hiring. I will say, we finished our round, well, I should say the first search and screen, and unfortunately, we had to fail that search. And we're moving into an abridged version of a search as of next week. And so this position, we are hopeful to have in place by the end of May. The only other piece would be our crops and soils position, which was Becky Braithel. And again, she too left the organization as of March 20th. This was her goal. And I know she did conduct in conjunction with Land and Water, I believe, and the entire sort of division last March 19th, a growers workshop. And so there were 25 attendees there. And so she did fulfill this one goal before she departed. Questions?
Could you maybe review for us, Carrie? So as of next Monday, once the vacancies filter out there, where we're at with educators that are on staff
Sure.
then? So we kind of have a picture of
Who we
what
have.
you're working with right
Right.
now.
Yep. As of current, I have a 1.0 4-H educator, and we will then, of course, have the intern for the summer. I do have our food-wise position, our coordinator. That's technically a 0.3 for each. And again, that's not on the contract, but they are present, and they will be officed out of Baldwin. We would be moving forward with the HDR position. Again, that would be a 1.0. And then the 0.5 vacancy now as of community development. The only other one would be our 1.0, our outreach support associate, Laura Heinz, who supports our programming, marketing, and outreach, as well as the 4-H program.
Right, so you have the 4-H, the intern for the 4-H, the food-wise,
Correct.
0.3, which were all in the original proposal, were the ones we were going to retain. So the only one on staff then currently is the administrative support.
Correct.
The 1.0 on administrative support.
In place, yes. Any other questions? Thank you.
I don't see any. Thank you for coming.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, agenda item 7. Sorry. Thanks, John.
So the next item on the committee's agenda is a zoning amendment from the town of Hudson. Under state statute, even though the town of Hudson has their own zoning ordinance, the county board is required to ratify and approve that amendment. And specifically, the town of Hudson is looking at amending their provisions for what they call youth-oriented recreational facilities owned and operated by nonprofit organizations and governmental entities. And right now, those types of uses are allowed as a special exception in the town's agricultural residential zoning district, which occupies about 2/3 of the town. And the special exception use is the equivalent to what the county requires for conditional use. They simply call it a special exception. And specifically what the town is proposing, you see they had 8 specific standards for approval, and I won't go down all of them, but under number 1, the amendment would cut out the requirement that there be no significant opposition from surrounding property owners. The rest of them you see are fairly objective. We included the minutes in your packet from their hearings. I think the minutes are somewhat of a summary of the discussion that took place. But if I were to speculate, I think number 1 was probably removed because it is somewhat subjective. You know, how do you define significant opposition? Is it 51% of the abutting property owners? Is it 75%? Is it 80%? So I think what they're trying to do is clean up their code provisions for this type of use. And so that's what's before the committee tonight for your consideration.
Yeah, go ahead.
John, does that mean, when I read that no significant opposition from surrounding property owners, is that they just want no one to complain? I mean, is that basically saying, we aren't going to listen to you? I just look at that and think, that's probably not something that should be taken out of there, because it erases any concerns that someone else might have.
And I think for now, they may be wanting to remove that because, again, that is subjective. So, you know, what I view as significant or what you would view as significant could be different. So I don't think they want to wrestle with that.
Okay, but does that take away any and all comment from the public?
Oh, no, not,
okay.
absolutely not, because there still is the public hearing requirement.
Okay.
People still have the opportunity to make their comments or concerns known, and the town can certainly take those individual concerns into consideration. You know, just looking at that standard, it's somewhat ambiguous. What does significant opposition mean? So if it were a county ordinance and I was talking to you about that provision, that was something I would certainly have a concern with as well. So.
Any other comments or questions on this one? Yes, go ahead.
I'm just curious, was there a specific project in mind that was the catalyst for this recommendation?
I'm not sure. The minutes didn't really discuss any specific project that was the impetus for this. There may have been one in the works that was being discussed. I don't know.
Anything else? All right. Anyone want to make a motion? All right, go ahead, Carrie.
I move that we approve the resolution for the town of Hudson zoning ordinance amendment, chapter 1 of the zoning.
I have a second. Supervisor Van Summeren, thank you. Any other questions or comments? That, I think we're ready for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Really opposed? Carries unanimously, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Agenda item 8, discussion of the proposed CDD forfeiture schedule.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is an agenda item that the committee had asked for a while back, and we held off to bringing it forward to the committee because Chapter 1 of the county's ordinance, and that didn't even have citation authority for Chapter 15 because it hadn't been amended for a while. And so it really didn't have any weight in that until Chapter 1 was amended. And so I do want to take and make it clear, I was underneath the impression in that the forfeiture schedule was in Chapter 1, but I am incorrect. And so if the committee would like to proceed with a forfeiture schedule like this, then that we would need to make a small tweak to Chapter 1 to just reference the forfeiture schedule. We wouldn't actually put the forfeiture schedule in the ordinance that way, and that the committee could amend it similar to like a fee schedule, and that if you know, especially if you started getting a lot of complaints on a particular forfeiture amount. So I was really just kind of throwing this together very rough, but the courts have a set schedule or a chart that if you say that there's a forfeiture or at the actual fine of $250, by the time you have court cost on that, they automatically calculate it up to the $450, $250. And so then tried to take and come up with some of the common violations that we might see in community development, not just in zoning, but also land and water, even with the solid waste side of it. And so, and tried to just show some examples of a stepped increase in that for maybe bigger violations or violations that are repeat offenders. If they're more egregious in that, then they would go up higher. Right now, all of our forfeitures are the $200 forfeiture plus $189.50 court cost for a total of $389.50. So they're all treated the same. Of course, this schedule, if you were to adopt something like this, would be the new minimums. and staff could still go higher and that up to $1,000 forfeiture. And then the court cost is like $397.50. So it'd be $1,397.50 total. But this is just kind of a tiered approach. One of the things that we commonly work on is the junk violation. You know, you can see that the forfeiture amount is higher there. It's not that that is a bigger violation in all cases necessarily, but there's, you know, chances for contamination, and these forfeiture amounts are also meant to kind of grab somebody's attention and actually say, hey, this is serious, we got to get moving on this. So that's kind of the idea behind this, and I don't know if the committee's got any opinions to these amounts. Really, these amounts are all able to be moved in $50 increments as far as the actual forfeiture, the deposit amount here. Those are all $50 increments, and then court costs, and that would be calculated automatically.
Go ahead.
Jason, would this affect the Amish? You know, we're working with the Amish and dealing with them. Is this going to affect them also, or is that what's behind some of this? Maybe a little reason to have a forfeiture schedule.
And that's would be countywide. And
yeah, right.
So just to be in all honesty, forfeitures are not a great tool in that to get compliance. A lot of times the forfeiture, after we issue 2 letters to them and that we're following our normal enforcement process, we give them 2 warnings and then we issue the violation or the forfeiture amount. Then that's kind of like, hey, we mean business. And if the property owner comes around and complies, then it's up to the staff member that issued the citation, and they can actually dismiss it through the court system. And so that is really the effective tool for this, is if they do come around and comply, we can just get rid of it. However, these forfeiture amounts can also be a per day violation. So as they continue and as they remain in violation, if we go to court, and that we can actually seek a per day forfeiture amount. So, and the county has done that in several different cases. And those amounts can get, you know, into the $50,000 to $70,000 range pretty quickly.
So I just noticed one of them here is unauthorized installation repair of a private on-site wastewater system. All of those, 1, 2, 3, 4, are going to be hard on some of our Amish people.
Yeah, so like number 1 there, unauthorized install or repair, you know, doing the work when you're not a plumber, you know, would be definitely one. Now, if they're doing a privy though, and that a privy, you don't need to be a plumber to install. It's still got to be inspected through our office, but that's a county sanitary permit, not a state sanitary permit. Failure to comply with the order, so that's a failing septic system. You can see that's why that one's a little bit higher, because we mean business. And by the time we get to there, we've already issued them 2 warnings to repair their system, you know. So failure to maintain the system, those are more common. So you missed the 3-year pumping cycle, you know, so that's why that citation is a little bit less. Improper domestic waste disposal, that is, you know, I dropped a pump down my septic tank and I pumped it out, you know, in the road ditch or in the yard. And I think most people know that that is not acceptable. And so that's why that's a $893 citation. So that's kind of the scale, you know, and that approach is, I mean, I think people that live in St. Croix County now know that they can't just dump their waste or pump it out of the tank like that, so.
I also noticed there's a violation of animal waste storage, piling, spreading, or nutrient management plan. That's
correct, and
that's
that'd be on the
also
land and water side, and
right.
also recycling hazardous waste in that 389.50, so, yep. So this is intended to be the forfeiture schedule for the whole department. But then if, you know, we got repeat offenders, so let's say that we go out there and we were out there last spring, they pumped their sewer on the ground, now we're out there now and they pump it out on the ground again, and they say, well, I got a holding tank, or my tank is always filling up, it's cheaper to me to keep pumping it and trying it. then that would be a case that I would probably advise our staff, hey, go to the full $1,000, so it'd be almost $1,400 to try to get enough fine there that it makes it worth it to pump it properly.
Any other thoughts or comments on it, on the forfeiture schedule? I suppose you need a motion.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then you'll see something at the county board with chapter 1 amending again,
Right.
just in that, right now, chapter 1, I believe says the forfeiture or deposit amount for each ordinance violation is $200, so then it'll just refer to the community development forfeiture schedule. That'll be the change. Yep.
Yep.
So that's a discussion, no motions. tonight.
Oh,
You'd refer it back for a future agenda item.
okay, sure. Yep, thank you. We'll refer it back for future agenda items then.
Do you see anything that you'd like changed right off?
Yeah, anything you want to flag right now?
My thought is, you know, this is a good tool, but we also know that sometimes having kind of an escalating thing, so like first violation, second violation, third. So, I mean, there might be someone who is looking at, just pick any one of these things, whether it's signs, someone who's just going to be openly defiant and say,
Yep.
I don't care what you say about my sign, I'm putting up what I want. So now you're in the hassle of trying to collect and restore. I mean, is this a sufficient deterrent to stop people from being defiant, or?
I think so, probably. I mean, it's a lot better than what we've got.
Okay. All right,
I
it's an
will say,
improvement.
as far as the repeat offenders or the severity of the violation, that's in our enforcement policy that we adopted about a year and a half ago. But I'll be happy to say that Abby Coffin's doing a great job keeping up in that with all of our compliance work. And so there's no violations or complaints that are having to be prioritized right now because of staff timing to be able to go out to them. So we are getting to every single site. And then it is really up to Abby or whoever is doing the enforcement action to be, to start here. And then if it's a repeat offender or if they are not getting compliance, they can up the amount, and that. And it's just a bigger shock when you open it in the mail, and that's a larger amount, and that's what we're really hoping to get to. And that is, let's get compliance, and that we're not so much concerned about the amount for the dollars, but get compliance with the ordinance.
Thank you.
So what happens if they don't pay? Do they just keep accruing thousands of dollars and thousands of dollars till you reach the property value, and then the property comes over back to the county, or how is that? What's the long term of this?
Well, I'd rather not say that in a public meeting, but
Okay.
anyway, how this goes, and that is, so if you're driving home tonight and you get pulled over, and that the driver, or the cop is gonna ask you a driver's license, and you've got all your personal identification information on your driver's license number, height, weight, whatever. Our staff don't have that, information when they issue the citations. And so we issued the forfeiture, it goes to the court system, and that they have a court date. And then at that point, we're hoping that they go in and kind of plead not guilty. And that, because that'll give us an opportunity to do like a pretrial conference, and that where we can sit down, we can talk about it. And generally, we would try to get into like a stipulation agreement where, yes, I'll get the property into compliance by this date, otherwise I know I'm gonna have to pay this forfeiture. And then if you get it into compliance by that date, then you won't have to take and pay the forfeiture. So we can try to get into that agreement. Otherwise, in that if they don't show up and that there's a default judgment and that for basically a guilty plea, and that's entered on that citation, and then it'll sit there for a couple years while we're trying to get the property into compliance before a warrant is issued for the arrest. Now, the reason for the personal information is if I've got a common name like Sam Hill, how many Sam Hills are in St. Croix County? And is the sheriff's department really gonna follow up on that because they don't have that personal information?
So that's one of the challenges in that with zoning enforcement in general. And so what we've really tried to do to combat a lot of that is to be very timely with our enforcement follow-ups. So we got the first letter that we give them 30 days to come into compliance, and that we're there within a week, and that to take and follow up on that, we give them another 30 days if there's no compliance or if there's progress, either way. And then we jump into the forfeiture if there is no improvement to it. But if there is improvement, then we've got an abeyance period that's between Abby and the property owner to work on it. And I'll tell you, as long as they're making progress in that, we generally try to work with the people of the county and that to, you know, some violations are much bigger. They got to do a lot more to get it into compliance. Other things are maybe just cutting off a pipe and reconnecting it to their sewer system. It's a lot easier. So that's kind of our process.
Any other thoughts, questions? All right, we'll move to agenda item 9 then. Consideration of proposed amendment to chapter 11. Actually, based on discussion with some other supervisor before the meeting, I think we can combine 9 and 10. They're both considerations, and we'll kind of go back and forth a little bit between them.
Okay. And if it's okay, Mr. Chair, I'm going to let Supervisor Van Summeren kind of talk about the Chapter 11 one, but I'll just jump to the ordinance here. There is only one change proposed, and it's on page 12. And it is in regards to the landowners signing an agreement or a piece of paper and that for manure application and that to their property. So the last sentence here, a summary table, is very similar to the information that, or the text that was already in the ordinance. It's just, it was easier to put it all new. But this was from the June 2024 draft. That's where this language came from. And Tim and I have had some conversations about what this might actually entail. And what we were using for an example, Tim brought it up in that we've got a cost share agreement right now. And so if somebody is applying cover crops to the acres, and that we've basically got an Excel spreadsheet that has the parcel number, the property owner name, and that it's actually got coordinates north and south, and then they just sign in the last line and that where their name is. And so all their, well, also it has the total field acres there laid out, and so that would be what they would sign. So that is basically an Excel spreadsheet. Everybody just signs over here, but that is the information in that we could do. We could keep it that simple, or we could do something a lot more to a lot larger extent if you wanted to. But simply parcel number, acres, property owner, and then what they sign. Could be as simple as what it needs to be.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, for those who don't know what precipitated this, what brought this up, one or two of the producers who spoke already this evening talked about how they thought they had this all taken care of, and how one of them brought up that when the entire board voted, the entire board voted 18-0. I was one of those who voted for that, by the way. And at that point, after hearing you guys speak, and I think most of you that are here today were here then too, and there are a few others, we believe that what you said was true. We believe that in good faith you took care of that, and we wouldn't have to worry about having an NMB that does not, that is meaningless. It's a way of us making certain that you're putting your manure where you say you're putting your manure. And that night, 18 of us were convinced of that. Now, one of the speakers tonight said nothing has changed. That's where the difference is. And here's what changed. How many of you get the Country Today? Do you get the Country Today newspaper? Any of you producers back there? You do? Okay. So, a fellow farmer of yours brought in a section of the Country Today, and I don't have the date on it. I made a copy of it, so I didn't have to drag that big thing in. But anyway, brought it in and said, what do you think of this? I know you guys have just been working with this. And again, like I said, he also is a producer. He joins you as a producer. He said, you may want to reconsider. So here's what's happened. After those of you who are here said, you know, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, the Country Today comes out with a story, a little article on the Pierce County farm likely to expand to 6,500 cows. Do you remember reading that? You get the paper. Did you read it? I didn't read that article. Pardon? I didn't read that particular article. Okay. I know about it. I did. I read it, and so did several others. So you don't know what it says. I'm going to read just a little portion of what it has to do with Breeze Dairy in Pierce County wanting to expand to 6,500 cows. And so they talked about, there's pushback there, of course, for that. And they talked about the DNR and the DNR giving their approval to that. And also one of the things that came up, he said their main concerns deal with the amount of manure produced and spread across the land the farm doesn't own. In other words, the farmer, the producer, does not own. Potentially contaminating waterways and people's wells. And by now, I think all of us in this room know how important fresh, clean water is to us. We don't want to jeopardize that in any way. We can get along without cows, but we cannot get along without water. We need that. That's how important it is. Here's what it is. Of the 6,500 cows, and you guys can tell me that more than I know, according to the newspaper, the print, that's 80 million gallons of manure that they're talking about. Probably pretty close. There were several landowners listed on the nutrition management plan for the factory farm. They're calling this a factory farm, whose land was going to be used for manure spreading. Several of these landowners that we got in touch with, so the newspaper people went and got in touch with the people who were named. Evidently they weren't concerned about having names in public. The people who were named got in touch with them. They had no such agreement with Bridge Dairy. They had no such agreement with anyone to haul manure there. And they came forward saying that their land was falsely listed. They never consented to it. Now, when you were here prior to this, when the whole board met and before when you met with us, we talked about this. And we, the county, looked at it as this is the way that we know where that manure goes. We know what happens to it. And we talked about the very owner of this farm who also owns the farm in Emerald and who also is looking to expand that and has a DNR blessing for that. And you guys said we wouldn't do that. We're honest people. I believe that. But one of yours is not. And that's what brings this up. It brings it up because it's fresh in my mind. It brings it up because even farmers are bringing this in and say, hey, what's going on here? Bring it up and say, you should check on this because we don't want the farmers around. This small farmer doesn't want the big farmer to contaminate his well either. And he's in the same business that you are. So all that we want to change is that we make sure we know where you're going to spread that manure. And that's what brought this up. That's why I bring it up again. Because I think we have to have some sort of teeth. We just looked at teeth that Jason was working on for fines. I'll call them fines. There's teeth there. He brought up, if we charge these people this, we hope that they're going to pay. This is the same teeth. But all this teeth is you know where you've got agreements. All you have to do is share that. Now, I don't know what makes that proprietary information. I can look at a plat book and see where Beaumass Dairy is, and I know about where they're going to spread land because I know what land is there. Why can't you tell me that? I know who owns the land. It's in the plat book. Not a big deal. It's going to take a little bit more effort on the part of the producers to do that. But I think you would rather know too that you have an agreement with Joe Schmo down the road, and that he doesn't have agreement with 6 other producers to put manure on his land, because then you're going to be out in the cold. And so I'm recommending that we reconsider this at the full board level based on the information that we see here in front of us. I mean, this is printed information. You can't call it a lie. They followed through with it, and see what the rest of the board takes. I'm not saying I'm going to vote for it or against it, but I think we have to. We, the CDC, has to consider this now. It's very important that we do. Thank you.
So I can just clarify. So this is just here to take and talk about to see if we want to move it forward tonight. However, we can't move it forward until we have a public hearing in the standing committee to the county board. And so if you wanted, we could take and publish this and that for a hearing, and that it could be as soon as next month, and that we can get it on there in time. It just requires 2 weeks that for the hearing notice, which then could be as soon as June county board.
I think that would be a good idea. However, before we do that, I'd like us to move on into section number 10, because I think that's going to cement the reason why we have to do this. Okay?
Okay.
I think that's going to show the urgency for this to happen.
So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Stieber. So.
Good evening. Jason asked me to, where are we at on this thing? Here we go. I think that's it. So Jason asked me to put together, after the presentation that we gave a meeting or two ago, there was items that we talked about where we have really accomplished a lot. And I think some of the priorities that were set, we've almost met those entirely. Others we had made very little progress on, or we've made only modest progress on. And we wanted to make a list of items that were related to that ground and surface water priority plan that we talked about at the last meeting. And we wanted to stay within that plan because that plan's been adopted and is incorporated into many different levels of our work. I mean, if we wanted to make a list of anything that we could think of that we thought might help, I mean, I could do that, but it's going to take, 10 or 15 pages for sure. But, and so we focused on 2 areas of work that we thought were within our ability to work, and that is ways that we could reduce the nitrogen load. It was mentioned in the plan to discuss denitrification tanks. Those, would you like to come up and help? Or when we're done, maybe. Yeah. It was mentioned to consider the denitrification tanks for septic systems. When you look at and a couple of the areas that we have in the county that have very high nitrates, I was able to count all the septic systems, we were able to look at the contribution of the different sources. It equates to about 4% of the total nitrogen load that is going on. Basically, if we were to implement something like that, it would be a huge cost for landowners. It would probably save about 50%. And so it would go to 2.5% contribution. So I don't think that would be a very big contribution. I've also been able to compile septage when those are pumped, those septic systems are pumped and it's applied. I have the data from DNR and is able to calculate the contribution of that. It's more like 5%. And we could work with DNR to consider that applications so we get them out of the areas that are high in nitrates. And then there's a lot we could do on corn nitrogen. And we are doing some work on that now, and we could continue that work. We could probably do a better job of nutrient crediting on the manure release, especially on fields that have received multiple applications, repeated applications. And then there's possibility to reduce nitrogen leaching through adoption of cover crops, getting a higher percentage of those. Some of these things we're already working on, but we could increase that or continue those things. Then also, one item is that was mentioned, we haven't done a lot of work on it, and that is to work with these municipalities on a wellhead protection plan try to ask them, and try to encourage them to consider the area of influence for their wells. There's a lot that could be done in some of those areas to reduce the load in very specific areas, and mainly protect the municipality. We also have phosphorus is addressed as well in that plan, and those are things that we have been doing a lot of work on. And some of these things we could be involved in. It's not comprehensive, but all of these things were mentioned in that priority plan. One thing we could do, we could maybe do a better job of buffering on waterways. There's programs for that. If we could encourage that, I think that would go a long ways on the phosphorus end of things. And then we're doing most of these items. There's some items that were mentioned in there as far as well seals and manure storages. We're paying cost share now to close those. We could require those to be closed if property transfers. I'm not positive we have the ability to do that legally, but other approaches I mention in here because very frequently in that priorities plan we talk about rules that we want to change, and having worked on those over the years is extremely difficult to change anything in the state. And a lot of times you go to change a rule and it ends up getting changed different than you thought, and it ends up making things worse. But if we don't have a plan, if we really think that's what we want to do, we need to decide that we're going to do that and come up with a legislative plan and work with partners and put things forward and stick with it for multiple years. That's just a recommendation because I can see how sometimes we get sucked into doing a resolution or something from some other county, and we sit and debate something, and it's kind of like, should we support this or not? If we had a plan of what we really think needs to be changed at the state, we could very quickly say, yeah, well, we're going to pass on this one or whatever. The next item is kind of one of the priority plan items was that we haven't done much on, and that was to establish a water quality committee. And there's a super amount of work associated with something like that. And you'd have more committees to go to. We'd have to do appointments. It'd just be a lot of work. And possibly to address that need to keep water quality front and center, we might consider formalizing outreach that we would do and just commit to doing certain things to reach growers, to reach contractors, and even to the general public, which I think is a large area of need, possibly just for general education, on drinking water, farming, nitrogen cycling, those kinds of things. If that would meet that need of what was intended in that plan, that might be a more positive approach than having another committee that we have to get supervisors appointed to and staff have to prepare for, and that's just an idea that I had for that. I also think it's important to keep up with the CGMP network monitoring that we have going. It's very well developed and it's showing a lot of good things. And continue to work in some of these areas on septic impacts and nitrate skiing events. We're doing that. Sinkhole layers, we're developing and maintaining that. It does take a little bit of work. Also, there was quite a bit of work on bacteria or interest in bacteria in the priority plan. And we are doing a little of that with evaluating some of the quick tests that are available. And we're doing a little of that this year, and I think we could continue to do some of that work. And it's not as big of an issue as it seemed like it might have been at one time. And we've closed a lot of wells. I think we've closed about 160 wells in the last 20 years. So a lot of those wells that were closed probably helped solve some of that problem because they were older wells, shallow, that sort of thing. Work to increase the nutrient management plan in the counties. We're have cost share or sales sample. We initiated a new program this year for that, and it's already paying off a little bit. And then consider cost-sharing drinking water treatment systems possibly as a way to, we know that if we do all this work on the previous page and we implement everything and we get all kinds of grants in here, it's still going to be a problem in some areas for some people for quite a long time. I don't believe that it's going to be forever. I think we can reduce nitrates in some of these areas through some actions. But getting the treatment systems in the hands of people that need them might be something we want to think about. And then expand our groundwater supply monitoring. That's something that I think will be important in our aquifers. We're doing a little bit of monitoring from some wells that we acquired from DNR, and it's quite revealing how, you know, these wells aren't pumped at all, so we're just monitoring the static level of the groundwater. And this might be something we want to consider for a longer-term objective, and not nearly as critical as some of these other things that I talked about. But one, we get into a dry cycle, for example, and we've really developed our urban area, our rural areas into subdivisions, and we also have, you know, wells out there for agriculture and maybe even industry on the edge of that. There's going to be conflicts, and this might come shooting to the forefront in our minds. We might be talking about groundwater supply more than we ever have, just based on the number of homes that we have in the country and the fact that there could be potential for conflicts there. And that's something I would look for opportunities to do. We already have the equipment. We were going out and doing 7 or 8 wells. I think we could expand that if we looked around and found more wells. And anyway, that's what I had. That was some things that were addressed and not addressed so well, and that's what I came up with.
I have a couple things. This is some good recommendations, Tim. You know, I look at the water quality issues as a public health issue as much as it is, you know, a security issue. There's some people don't think we have a problem, and as soon as they start to look into it, they start saying, "Hey, wait a minute! I don't know if I don't know if I want to drink this water unless it's been tested." Is it possible to take some of these ideas and put them on a matrix about the amount of effort it takes maybe on one line and the amount of impact on the other, so that we can zone in and say, okay, you know, this proverbial low-hanging fruit. Are there some things that don't cost a lot that we can use with current resources? Other things that might be longer term? And is that something that Jason and staff could do and present? Does that
We could work on that, yeah.
Okay. I had a follow-up too, and this is as much for Jason as it is for you, Tim. In Jason's conversation, he was talking about, and I'll go back to the draft of Chapter 11 that was being discussed. I remembering some of the pushback that we were listening to our egg producers, our dairy producers predominantly, that they were concerned that complying with the requirements that they indicate the nutrient management plan spreading, that might reveal something that was proprietary or something that might put them at a disadvantage and things. Mm-hmm. It seems to me that the proposal that you've given, Jason, is one that takes it out of, what is it called, the SNAP system? Some cumbersome system, I'm probably using the wrong language. A system that's used to enter in data that might make it revealed to others. But what you were talking about, Jason, is a separate spreadsheet that would be something that just your department would see and others would not. Is that correct?
Correct. It depends on what the committee or staff really want to see in that information, but it could be simply parcel number, property owner, acres, and then I agreed to allow X farmer and that to spread manure on my land, and then they sign it. Yeah. So it's just like a little spreadsheet. But yes, that would be something that would be separate from SNAP Plus.
Yeah, but that is subject to open records release. I mean, just, you know, so somebody could come in and say, I want to see a copy of that.
Okay.
So nothing that the government receives, no documents the government receives virtually are confidential. If we get a list, we would share it with anyone who asks for it.
Okay. So, in a prior life, when new regulations would come by and we didn't have efficient, easy systems, sometimes what we would do is say, here's what your ledger looks like. And as long as you have the ability to produce it when asked, and an auditor might once in a while come and visit an office and say, what does your ledger look like? And as long as someone could produce it, they might do a spot check. But it wasn't something that was as onerous as, let's say, a tax filing or something like that. I don't know if that is a possibility here. I'm sure that the people that are here are complying. It's the ones that don't show up that wind up being problematic. So
I believe that is the intention in that for us as staff. We're not going to take and want these every year on every single producer. But if things aren't adding up in their nutrient management plan, and we've got a lot of nutrient management plans that maybe don't accurately reflect the amount of acres that they're even farming anymore. And so that would be the ones that we would want to follow up and make sure that our information is correct and current.
all right, good, thank you.
So maybe not that they have to submit that list of properties, but they would have to be able to produce it on request?
That's what I was thinking of. Just
Yeah, that's what you're
yeah,
suggesting.
to be kind of, I hate to use the phrase audit ready because it sounds so onerous, but just so that if someone were to ask, you could say, here's my business, here it is, here's my file, and keep it in a safe place. You know?
Yeah, something that can be inspected then to verify that
Right.
the properties are
Right.
within that nutrient management plan. Okay.
It's just an idea I wanted to float out there because I reckon someday perhaps this system that'll be, in the cloud, people will feel is secure and not feel like they're having to reveal their business model. But in the interim, there has to be some way, whether you call it a compromise or a partial solution, there has to be some way so that we're not putting undue burden on people that have the intent of complying and want to work with us. So.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, question for you, the NMP. So one of the people who spoke earlier talked about manure being hauled into the county, manure being shifted from one farm to the other. How does that affect something like that? Because you know that if that's in an NMP in Pierce County, it's not going to be hauled back there.
No, right.
That manure is not going back. It costs big money to make a 50, 60-mile round trip to haul manure. So how does that work?
And so that was, so they'll have to account for that manure in their nutrient management plan. And remember when we were going back through chapter 11, I took and talked about having a starting volume or starting quantity of manure and an ending quantity of manure, because they might not get it all on in the fall. And so it's just a running tally with the volume that they have. But yes, they'll have to have enough acreage here to put it on.
Thank you. One other question for Tim. Tim, they established a water quality outreach program. It was easy to see you kind of glossed over that, not one of your priorities. However, I think if you were to ask the almost 100,000 people that live in this county what's important to them, I think most of them would say water quality. And I think we need to establish a water quality outreach program. I think should not be an option. It should never have been an option. Again, if we start losing our clean water, we aren't going to be able to attract any businesses because businesses want clean water. We will lose people who are living here because the water is not clean. In the Hudson area, there's been a taste of that over the years with the Junker landfill. Junker landfill destroyed a lot of wells about in the area where we okayed the deer hunting thing. And I witnessed some of that. In fact, when I worked for St. Croix Electric, I read the meters that they were gassing off all of that stuff that was under the ground. I also witnessed that on the south end, there's a pond that water would run off from that Junker landfill. Some days that water would be green as grass. Next, it'd be red as fire, red as blood. So that's the kind of thing that we have to guard against. You mentioned in your presentation nitrates and phosphorus. Yeah, we can't put up with that. We do need a water quality outreach program, something that maintains the freshness of water. Thank you.
I think we want to be business friendly. We also want to be consumer and resident friendly. There is a cost to what we have right now, and some of it is hidden, and some of it shows up in the doctor's office or in other places. It's cheaper to prevent these problems than it is to discover and try to correct. I mean, we saw this nice graph before that had to do with, global emissions and low carbon. It's really carbon intensive to have to bring in your drinking water to your house. So it's, better if we can, I think the outreach, I agree with Supervisor Van Summeren that outreach is essential because people can't judge themselves from their tap whether or not it's safe water. It can come out looking a little murky and it's actually safe to drink. In other cases, it can look crystal clear and taste great and not be safe to drink. So that's the outreach need that we keep putting holes in the ground and building rural developments that have these great 3 acres and a septic system. And the people that are doing that probably aren't drilling deep enough. And they love the idea that they're butting up against a farm field because they've got deer running through and it all looks great. They aren't testing their water and realize that that they're living in a high-risk situation for them and their children. So I think outreach is essential. It needs to be almost a campaign kind of thing.
Here are a couple of my concerns, and we've talked about this before. If we go back to the Chapter 11, our original verbiage on that includes a table of all landowners, associated acres, and contact information. So we have all of that already. The only thing that we're missing on that is the agreement. And I will say that I will never support something that's going to ask for the actual contracts and agreements between a company and an individual or back and forth. We don't need that for open records requests because they will pile in. We don't need to have that those contracts and review what the farmers are doing and how they're doing it and any of that. We don't even know legally if a farmer and a landowner may have a non-disclosure agreement between that contract. Now we're opening ourselves up to legal issues if that's the case, so that those contracts can't be shared to begin with. And if we have something that's signed, or if we require something that's signed that says you're able to spread this manure on my land, sign it here as a simplified form, does that supersede the contract that they already have? I think that's an interesting legal argument to try to navigate as well. But I noticed that in our next topic here with the plan to improve water quality, as far as NMPs and farms, our notations on there are to increase acres in the NMPs, better monitoring for soil loss, and manure nitrogen crediting. So there's nothing in that whole plan that is saying, farmer, it's your fault, or it's because of manure. So I have a hard time wanting to change Chapter 11 when we just got through this. We already have the table of landowners, all the acres, the contact information. I don't think we need to take this a step further.
I agree. I think modifying Chapter 11 this soon after we passed it is a little is jumping the gun. We haven't even gone through a season since it's been passed. As far as the water quality stuff, I don't necessarily know that I think we need another committee to organize and meeting schedule and plan for, but there are definitely some things we could do around messaging and awareness that would be helpful, and I think it's worth looking into that kind of stuff further. Go ahead.
I want to make sure I'm understanding where Supervisor Shirley is coming from. Because my understanding was that they were not, that we were not asking our ag producers in our amendment to fill out forms for which they get a government subsidy. I think it's really important to recognize that that is at the essence of a nutrient management plan. We are not coming out with rules without a big carrot. But my understanding was that they were not having to provide the level of detail that you cited.
Yeah, Supervisor Rice, I threw that out there as an option because we had a lot of conversation back, a couple months ago about the amount of detail. And so I was just trying to elaborate. I mean, literally, if you think of like an Excel spreadsheet, column A, parcel number, column B, and that would be the property owner, column C, acres, and then column D would be signed here. And then across the top, it would be I, give producer X the ability or the permission to spread on my parcel listed below, so.
What's required under the ordinance right now, with no changes, what's required?
Nothing. And that they would just claim those fields as acres in their nutrient management plan. And then they're submitting it to us and that as accurate and honest and, so.
So just the total number of acres?
Total number of acres per field, yep.
That's true, and so that takes the teeth away. I agree with your, let's do a spreadsheet and just sign it, the guy signs it and says yes. I don't see where there's going to be a whole lot of people looking for who's spreading manure and where they can spread it. I'm not convinced that's the issue. I am convinced that our producers just don't want to do it. And if it's a laziness, I say shame on them. But you guys should be as concerned about clean water as anyone, because when it goes south, I'm not going to get the blame, but you guys will, and I want to protect you. I like you guys, but there's rules that we have to play by. If you're a for instance, excavating company, you want to dump some gravel someplace that might be questionable, you have to get a permit. You have to sign a place where it's going to go. You have to sign it. The person who lets you do it has to sign it. There has to be that agreement. This is no different than that. It's in every industry in the world.
To go back to Supervisor Rice's question, Jason, you have a striking section in there. I was assuming that the way it is currently is correct?
Yes, correct.
So that stricken portion of that says a table of all landowners, associated acres, and contact information. So if that's what's currently in there, then yes, that's what I was talking about.
Correct. So the text that is struck there, I just put it as the sentence below, and that just because it just seemed like it made more sense, and that was what was originally presented back in June of last year. I thought it kind of meant the same stuff, or that the same information would be provided. Correct. Yep.
I think what Supervisor Sherling is, I mean, and I agree with it, is that the struck information is plenty of information until proven otherwise. Mm-hmm.
If I could disagree with you for a moment. Right now, this is fresh in our mind. A year from now, we have to bring it all back in again. All that research has to be done again. I think now is the time to bring it up to the whole board. That's what we're asking for. Bring it up to the whole board. Let them reconsider based on this kind of information that is public information, not hidden. Public information that shows that some people are not holding up their end of the bargain. And so I think that has to be addressed. That can't be put off for a year. That has to be addressed now. Otherwise, we get. How long has it been since we looked at this whole, all of these comprehensive plans? Another 10 years. 10 years from now, there could be water that's not drinkable in my well, in my faucet. we can't wait. See?
I get your perspective, I do.
So would you like staff to go ahead, publish the public hearing, create a draft document of what this might actually look like, similar to what I've talked about, and then you guys can have this conversation at the public hearing and decide whether or not to forward it onto the county board or kill it at that time?
I think that'd be the correct way to do it, yes.
Supervisor Shirley, go ahead.
I guess I would ask for a vote of the committee and see if we want to move this forward to a public hearing or not.
Yeah, the agenda item is listed as a consideration, so that gives you the ability to make a motion. So the motion can be either that you're going to postpone it indefinitely, or the motion is going to be that we would like to schedule a public hearing. Those are probably your two choices you're looking at.
Yeah.
So I think we should have the public hearing. I would like to make that a motion.
Uh-huh.
Now, we're one person short in our committee today, which,
Yeah.
you know, it's going to end up as a tie, probably. based
Probably.
on- And so maybe we should wait till next month to make that.
I'd like to see it on next month's agenda. Because from my vantage point, this is just one piece of the larger water quality issue.
So are
So-
you,
I'll second it.
okay, that was my question, thank you. I again think we're jumping the gun here. We can schedule this to review in the March meeting next year and let it go through a season. I think the motion on the floor right now is to make a public hearing next month for this ordinance.
And I would like to withdraw that and consider that next month when 5 of us are here instead of 4.
You like to consider the motion for the public hearing next month, is what you're saying?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. Correct if I'm wrong, but we can't just withdraw. We have to actually fail it and then
Right.
redo a motion, yes. Yeah.
So what you're saying then, Supervisor Van Summeren, is it's going to be a request for a future agenda item. You'd like this item placed on next month's agenda again. That is at the discretion of the chair of the committee.
To an extent, yeah.
It's not going to make any difference if it fails today or if it fails then, but there's going to be a third party, and I think if enough of us insist that it's on, that the chairman probably wouldn't be wise to shut that off.
If there's enough, I don't have a choice.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. We have a motion on the floor. I think everyone knows what their opinion is. The motion on the floor is to have, as it stands right now, is to have a public hearing next month on this, on chapter 11 again. I think we will do roll call for this one. Julie, can you do the roll call?
Supervisor Rice?
Yes.
Supervisor Van Summeren?
Yes.
Supervisor Shirley?
No.
Supervisor Anderson?
No. So the vote was 2-2, correct? The tie fails.
Put it right on the agenda for next month now.
Yeah, we'll take that on future agenda items under consideration. Any, I guess, discussion? I think we all know where we stand on chapter 11. Any discussion on, I'll call it 9B, the water quality stuff? Yeah. go ahead.
I think this is one of those things where we put it on the agenda for next month. And what I was sketching out here was that notion of some sort of a impact grid of effort also known as cost, next to impact, to see if we can't model this out, because it could affect, our budgeting and planning for next year as well, and future years. But I also agree with Supervisor Van Someren that the outreach to the community is important. We've got some people that show up at all these meetings that have had their lives impacted by poor water quality, and we need to learn from them. So on the agenda for next month.
I guess I'll ask the question because to summarize what you're looking for is the something table Pareto, however they want it is presented on these options, the cost and what I guess the impact is to either nitrogen or phosphorus levels in our groundwater.
Yes, and when I think of cost, I'm also thinking of staff time.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't necessarily mean additional outlay.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Does that request make sense, Tim?
Yeah, but it's a fair amount of work. I'm
yeah.
wondering if I should start working on it and basically let you guys know when I'm getting there, and then we
Sure.
can put it on agenda.
Yeah, I mean, if there's,
I would hate to rush something and then
Yeah.
make it mislead.
Yeah.
This was like one day ahead.
Right.
I thought about it ever since I did the presentation. I was thinking about it, and I just quickly typed something up.
I guess if there's something that I guess is obvious, right?
Yeah.
Maybe bring that up right away. But for the most part, we can schedule it when you're
Yeah.
ready. Yeah.
I'll get something put together.
Yeah.
One of the things I'd like to add, Mr. Chair, is the groundwater system is very complicated, and it is going to be very difficult to measure or know what the impact of any particular action that we take is going to be. So we can only guess in that, but to say that there's a fixed number that if you can invest this amount of money into, long-term BMPs on the land, that would be our goal, but we don't know how long it's going to take to see those impacts, and we don't even know if there is going to be an impact. So that's just one of the challenges. So there will be a lot of best guesses, I'll call it, in that table.
Yeah, the one that was given today was the denitrification tanks, right? Where that's I think 5% of the best. I guess I don't know if it's an estimate or it's known. I'm not going to theorize, I guess, as 5% comes from septic tanks, but that would be super expensive and would maybe be able to cut, like stuff like that format, like best case scenario would cut it in half, but it's super expensive. And even, staff time might be high, moderate, or low, and it might be one-time continuing or a one-timer continuing or medium term kind of deal, something like that. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we've got some guys waiting. Want more comments? They wanted to contribute some stuff, I guess.
No, I think we know where everyone stands in Chapter 11. I get the.
No, I think there was something related to the water.
Oh.
Water stuff that they were interested in.
Yeah, I think we'll leave it for a future public comment. Yep. Yeah, this one for sure. Yeah, because there will be more specifics on the next time we bring it up to talk about anyway. So, and then also I'm going to invite a septic guy to the next discussion of this too. Okay. That I know. Unless there's anything else from the committee on this, no. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it. All right. Now I think we're off to request for future agenda items, and I have a guess as to one.
Yeah, I would say, we can keep it on the agenda, the water quality programming options, and we can just see whether or not Tim has anything prepared for us. And then also, I think the whole conditional use permits assignment that we have, that we might want to make sure we have good training on that. And I don't think just looking at a 3-ring binder is sufficient. I don't know if that's the kind of thing that we need to ask court counsel for, or anything, but I know it's something we need to treat with care.
Any thoughts on that, Jason?
Yeah, no problem. I had that actually for the May meeting anyway. Scott Coner had asked for that at the last meeting and that, but I knew that Scott wasn't going to be here tonight, so that's why I pushed that off for a month, and we had a pretty full agenda, so.
Something I wanted to bring up, I know we've been pretty busy, but I know with chapter 1 being updated, I think chapter 17 needs to get looked at as well as I think there are a couple other ordinances we haven't looked at yet this term.
So in the Community Development Department, the ordinances that we haven't considered or amended would be Chapter 16, Shoreline, Chapter 17, which has some general provisions, and also the St. Croix Riverway Overlay, and then also Chapter 18 is floodplain, and those 3 ordinances all require DNR review, so we can get a draft, we can bring it to the committee, but then we're going to have to push it back to the DNR for their review, so those could take a couple months for the DNR to review, and then also Chapter 14, which is non-metallic mining. So those are the ordinances in that we haven't addressed yet, but if you would like us to take and start going through those ordinances, and that will take them one by one, so.
Let's start with I would probably do mining last.
Yep, we'll start with Chapter 17 because that talks about conditional use permits, and so we need to get that cleared up because of the new county board rules of order, so.
All right, thank you. Any further agenda items? No? All right, any announcements?
I've got some.
All right.
Recycling events are kicking off for the 2025 season. The first one will be our free electronic collection event, which is going to be a week from next Tuesday, April 29th from 2 to 6 p.m. That's going to be at the Bethel Lutheran Church here in Hudson, right off the frontage road there. There's already like 2,200 people online that are interested to attend that event, so that's going to be a pretty large event, hopefully. Tree sale pickup is going to be next Thursday and Friday, April 24th and 25th. Tree sales were very good this year. We were up about 15%, so we broke 90,000 or right at that amount of sales. That is getting to be a bigger and bigger community benefit, I think, because these growers are not wanting to deal with the small orders that one property owner would do. So they like to deal with the county because we buy thousands of trees in a crack. So on Tuesday, I had another meeting with the Amish. And at that meeting, we talked about the after-the-fact fees being put on hold until July 1st. We did help on that one Amish individual fill out a land use permit, and he's also going to be approaching the town of O'Galley to rezone his property for a sawmill, is what they told us. Some of the other issues that are being dealt with in the transportation committee is with the manure on the roads, so I brought that up as well. Overall, in that, the meeting was pretty good, but the Amish are worried if they comply with one thing that they're going to be, some other provision that's going to make them comply. So they're worried about the law of losing their lifestyle and that throughout all these rules. A big thing on Monday that came as a total shock to us is that John Hilgers here had wrote a carbon reduction grant, and we submitted that back in June. And this was for intermediate phase 3 of the Highway 35 bike and ped trail. So this was a segment from County Road V up to Big Guy's Barbecue. We broke up the original phase 3 because of the cost. It was almost like $4 million or $4.5 million to go all the way. So that segment we received $1,028,744 of funding for. And so that was quite a shock to us, and John did a great job on the grant. And so we're hoping to be able to design both phase 2 and that new phase kind of simultaneously, do the construction on both and that at the same time as well. Which, speaking of that, we've got RFQs that'll be due tomorrow on the design of phase 2. So that's moving forward as well. In parks and that, the entrance building and bathroom building are still moving along. We're hoping that they will be at least usable and open to our guests and that come May 1st. And as far as I know, they will be. We had bids for the Glen Hills Trail to connect the peninsula side over to the day use side. Those were due on Tuesday as well. Those came in within budget. So we'll be moving forward with that project. We also took and bid out the replacement of the gate on Glen Lake Dam there in Glen Hills, and that came in significantly higher than expected. And so I'm going to be meeting with the NRCS and DNR to look at other options for that. It's just a big unknown because it's down so far in the water. It's been like that for over 50 years. So that's what I have.
All right. Seeing there were no other announcements. Date of the next meeting, May 15th, 5 p.m. right here. See you right here. Yeah. You guys might be a seat over, but other than that, yeah. Other than that, I'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.